Welcome to week 4 of the semester. And for this week, we are moving forward into the finishing up of Beowulf, where he goes back home and then encounters a dragon that is causing a lot of problems, and then ultimately meets his demise at the hands of the dragon. And what we'll see is a continuation of a lot of the ideas that we've been discussing so far in terms of what's expected of a warrior, what's expected of a king, and the different roles that these characters play. As with the individual lines of the play, this play, I keep calling it a play, this poem, it circles around these same themes over and over again. We're going to look at that a little bit today, and in the reading notes, and in your discussion board posts. One quick note on your discussion board posts. Something that tends to come up in this course is a lot of times you will have a lot of summary in the text, and you think that I'm following you as to why the information you've chosen to include from the text illustrates the point that you're leading to. I can't make that journey. You kind of have to take me there. So include those specific details that show the why those things that you've chosen from the text matter to the overall point that you're trying to illustrate. So just keep that in mind as you're working, that everything that you include from the text, any summary, any quote, any paraphrase, needs to have a reason why. And that why should connect to the bigger themes that I'm asking you to look at in the discussion board this week. So as we go, I'm going to first click this here, and I'm going to click on Student Preview. This just shows what you look at what you see when you click on Blackboard. So you've got everything right here in the week 4 section. There's Beowulf Part 2. There's the checklist, and then the checklist is pretty simple this week. You're going to watch this video, which you're already doing, and then you're going to read the reading notes and complete discussion 6 by Friday, February 2nd, and comment on at least one classmate's post by Saturday, February 3rd. The rubric is the exact same as it's been for the last week. These are those longer discussion board posts, and you'll see when I comment on last week's post this week where there are areas where you can improve. Things get a little more consequential now. There's a higher point total, and because the posts are asking you to do a little bit more, but you're going to engage in those deeper topics, and I'm going to continue to give you feedback on that as you're working. So for this week, let's look at a couple of the major themes. I posted the documentary here as well. If you haven't had a chance to view that, I think you should. It's just excellent, and it does such a much better job than I can of introducing you to the culture and other things going on in this text. It's just beautiful. So if you haven't watched it yet, watch it. If you would like to watch it again, I showed it to my kids. They were a little bit terrified of the idea of Grendel, which makes sense. I think that's supposed to be, but then they understood the bigger part. That's also one of the downsides of having your dad be an English teacher, is that he makes you watch documentaries and other things about English texts. So I do think you'll enjoy it. It's a very well done production. The one that I think is strong. So here are the week 4 reading notes, and they have in them the key themes that we've been discussing so far. And I wanted to point to a couple of those this week as we're working through it, and really centering on a couple of major themes. So first, we think about the role of the warrior knight. Now, I've included in there some text from lines from the play. From the poem that illustrate this really well, but that's only a selection. You're going to likely find information or better illustrations that are more resonant to you as you are reading through the text and think, wow, this really stands out to me. But like the king, there's the expectations of warriors in this culture, and it's very much focused on this idea of mutual giving. So the warrior gives of himself to the king, which means anything he conquers, any loot, anything, any spoils from war, anything like that, are ultimately in service to the king. They go back to the king. But the expectations of a king are not that the king just sits on the wealth, but that the king gives it back to the warriors. So there's this mutual exchange going on where the warrior gives honor and wealth to the king, and the king in turn gives honor and wealth back to his warriors. And there's this idea that the king is the greatest of the warriors and represents that. You know, we met Hrothgar earlier in the previous section, and there's this struggle because Hrothgar cannot protect his people in the same way that a king should, that we're going to see Beowulf be able to step into. So we see that continued expectation that the king, one of the things he gives is protection, and he gives that glory and that wealth to his knights, who then give it back to him. So keep that in mind as you think about this idea of generosity. The king is never supposed to be one who simply sits on his wealth, but he is one that is supposed to give his wealth to his people and to protect them. Hrothgar couldn't protect, but he was able to set Beowulf to excuse me, Beowulf up to protect Heorot from Grendel's mom. Beowulf then sees the dragon come and recognizes his role as protecting the people. Even though he did not cause the dragon's problems, Beowulf still thinks, I have some responsibility here. He even acknowledges, maybe I have done something against God, and that this is my punishment for it. And my punishment flows to the people because of it. And so he bears that responsibility as a king, that that he is responsible for his people. And so you'll see how that plays out in the text, or in the text as you're reading it, but there's some notes here that will help you understand that. Also, so we mentioned the warrior culture and the expectations there, and then the king, what he's supposed to have. So if we think about the warrior culture as one of mutual giving, then we can think about the king, Beowulf as the king, as the ultimate king of that, of sacrifice and generosity. So there's the idea that no one should lack, because the warriors should be going and getting the wealth, giving to the king. The king then gives it back to the warriors in honor and grace, and then uses that wealth to build up the kingdom, to build up the mead halls and the central meeting places and things. And so if we think about it, it's not that distant from what we expect from our elected leaders today. Now, we're not in a kingdom in America, but there is the idea that our leaders are there to serve us. We elect them not primarily to serve themselves, but to serve us and our interests. And I know there's a lot of conflict about that as to whether or not they do that, but that expectation goes way back, that the person in the power is not supposed to just exercise authority, but should be giving that over to them, and the people will respect him for it. So you'll see in these two sections, and I split them out in the two sections so that you can see the difference, but that they operate in a link together. And that idea of giving extends to the role of the queen. And this is something that we saw earlier in Beowulf's earlier tale, but now we see it more explained more, or illustrated more, in the person of Queen Hygd. Now, she is contrasted with a legendary queen called Queen Modthryth, who basically was so spiteful and vindictive that anyone who looked at her could be tortured and killed, but that she learns that the role of the queen is to be one who is giving and thoughtful and wanting to serve other people, and not just simply hold that authority. And so you see that line of giving extend from the warrior culture to the king, and also to the queen herself. And that's why it's so important that when Beowulf and his people, his men return, that she is the one offering the cup to them, because that is her role as queen, is to serve. And she's even called here the peace weaver, the idea that the king may keep peace by crushing the enemies. The queen is there to weave peace by serving them. And that's just the way that this text presents the roles of the genders, especially in leadership. I'm saying that without any commentary on whether or not that is a good thing, but it is a way that things are situated in this text. So think about that. If you want to respond to it, in what way, of why those expectations are different. Are they good? Are they bad? That's up for you to decide as you think about it. But as they're situated in the text, you can reflect on the idea that the queen is in part of this relationship with the king, seeking to establish peace through giving. The king gives gold, he gives drink, he gives wealth. The queen also serves in that way, so that you have this mutual beneficial society. And you can contrast that with, as we talked about last week, Grendel's mother, Grendel especially. He takes, he doesn't give. He doesn't buy back the were guild. He doesn't pay back what they think he's owed, the blood price that he owes for all the lives that he's taken. He is a taker. The king is expected, and the queen are expected to be givers, and as much as the warriors are. So finally, we're going to talk about, if we think about the contrast of giving as well, the dragon. The dragon is the ultimate example of someone who does not give wealth, and who does not earn wealth, but takes and sits. And so the dragon in this case goes and finds a hoard and then stays there and consumes it and falls asleep on it. And if you haven't seen him, or if you haven't read the book, there's a great representation of this in the character of Smaug in The Hobbit, in Tolkien's, J.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. And J.R. Tolkien is a Beowulf scholar, or was a Beowulf scholar, and so a lot of what he has in the Lord of the Rings, several sections of it come from different things, but specifically the dragon Smaug is very closely related to the dragon we see here represented in Beowulf and another text. But the idea of the dragon is not a giver either. He is a taker. He takes and he sits. Remember, the king, his goal is to use wealth to distribute it to other people. The dragon does not distribute anything but sits and hoards. And he sits on his hoard and sleeps until someone comes along and takes it. And then that wakes him up and leads him to destruction. So Beowulf goes and he goes and he kills the dragon. Now in the dragon, we'll return to this idea of what the warrior service is, because that's this great moment where we see a changing of the guard and a passing on of this warrior culture in the character of Beowulf, who, despite Beowulf telling him no, and despite all of his companions leaving, decides, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to serve my king in the face of brutal circumstances. And he's honored for that, and in turn is able to honor Beowulf at the end by the returning of the gold. So those are the key topics to think about in this video. I moved through them fairly fluidly because they are all interrelated. You can't talk about the warrior and the king and the dragon without this relationship between the warrior and his king, and Wiglaf serving Beowulf as an illustration of that. So they're sectioned out differently in those 4 major sections in the reading notes, and so I think that's going to be very helpful for you as you read through these texts. Now, as you're doing that, if you have questions or concerns, feel free to let me know. I want to point really quickly to the discussion board post this week. Excuse me. Because there's 4 major questions for you to focus on, and they follow those 4 major themes in the reading notes. So if you're thinking about a question, go to that section of the reading notes and let that prompt you into something that you may write about. Try to use different lines from the text. I'm not going to say that you can't use the lines in the notes, but think about different ways that the text illustrates these points. And so you can see you've got a question here about the dragon. How is he a similar and different villain? So the dragon is not Grendel and is not Grendel's mom. And there's not one single idea of villainy here, but the dragon expands on that a little bit. So explain why. We'll talk. There's more talk there after. Excuse me. That there's discussion about the role of the queen, and you've got Beowulf as the king, and then the roles of warrior culture. So feel free to pick one of those questions, write a 300-word post about one single page, double spaced in Microsoft Word. It's better if you upload a Word document, but if you paste it in there, I can still read it fine. And I'll be giving you some feedback throughout the week and sending you some emails to that end. So I hope you enjoy this reading of the text. You can continue reading through this and thinking through these ideas of honor and chivalry and virtue and the things that we value there in these different characters. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Take care.